My name is Noah Carter. I'm 43 years old, retired from the United States Army after 2 decades of service. I live alone in a small town just outside of Austin, Texas, in a house that's a little too big for one man and always too quiet. I've never been the kind of person who looks back too much. The military teaches you to keep your eyes forward, your emotions in check, and your focus tight. That discipline stays with you even when the uniform is gone. I lost my wife 7 years ago. Cancer came fast and finished faster. We never had children, not because we didn't want to, but because timing always seemed to get in the way. Deployments, long tours, life moving forward at the wrong pace. Eventually, we just stopped trying. Since she passed, I haven't let many people in. I've had friends, sure, a few close buddies from my unit I still talk to now and then, but the days mostly blend into each other. Morning coffee, a jog through the same trail, fixing things that don't really need fixing. I keep a schedule even in retirement, because without it, I start to drift. There's a stillness to my life that most people would find unbearable. But for me, it's been safe, predictable, clean. There's comfort in routines when the rest of the world feels messy. I've always told myself I made peace with that. And I believed it. Right up until the day my phone rang and I saw a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me press accept. I didn't know that one call was about to undo every layer of control I'd spent years building. That morning, I was drinking black coffee on the porch, the same as I had every morning for years. It was sunny, the air smelled like cut grass, and I remember thinking it was a good day to clean out the garage. Then the phone buzzed. A simple vibration, just a name I didn't know and an area code I hadn't seen since my deployment in Alaska. That's how it started, with one ring, one voice from the past, and a sentence I still hear like an echo. Are you Noah Carter? Something shifted in me before I even knew what was coming. I felt it in my chest, like a gear catching after years of rust. Something was moving, and I couldn't stop it. I didn't know yet what that call meant. I didn't know there was a boy out there who looked like me, talked like me, and had no idea who I was. I didn't know that grief could stretch over 13 years and come crashing down in one breath. But that morning, everything started to change. My life wasn't settled. It wasn't done. I just hadn't seen what was left waiting for me. And that's when I realized, maybe I wasn't done being needed. Maybe I was about to learn what it really means to be a father. The number came from a 907 area code, Alaska. I hadn't seen that prefix in over a decade. My thumb hovered above the screen before I answered. I don't know why I picked it up. Something in my chest just said, do it. The voice on the other end was soft but steady. She said her name was Rachel and that she needed to speak to me about someone named Emily. My stomach dropped. That name hadn't come up in years. Emily Hart, the woman I met on base during my second tour at Fort Wainwright. We'd only been together 6 months, maybe 7, but those months stayed with me. She was smart, kind, the kind of steadiness that could hold a man together, even one as tightly wounded as I used to be. But I left, orders came, and neither of us reached back out. Rachel said Emily was in the hospital. Terminal. Something aggressive, spreading fast. She didn't give me details, just said it was a matter of days. I waited for the part where she'd ask me to visit. Say goodbye, but that's not what she said. She told me Emily had a son, 13 years old. His name was Liam. Then she paused and said, "He's yours, Noah." I didn't respond at first. I think I just sat there, staring out at my backyard, trying to make sense of the air around me. 13. That would have meant Emily was pregnant when I left. And she never said a word. Not once. Rachel must have heard the silence because she repeated it. "He's your son." I said no. I didn't raise my voice, didn't panic. I just said it wasn't possible. I would have known. I would have been told. But the thing is, my voice cracked when I said it. Just enough for her to hear that something in me had already started to shift. She didn't argue. She just said Emily didn't want to ruin my career, that she thought I'd be better off not knowing. I didn't believe that, not fully, But I also knew Emily wasn't cruel, and she didn't lie. At least not the woman I remembered. Rachel told me Emily didn't have anyone else. Their parents were gone. Her ex never stayed. She said Liam didn't know anything about me, just that his mom had been holding on to something for years. And now, at the end, she wanted to make it right. I felt heat rise in my face, not anger exactly, more like confusion boiling into something I couldn't name. My hands were clenched. I hadn't realized it until I looked down and saw my knuckles had gone pale. I asked where they were. She said Anchorage. I told her I'd come. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time. The sun had shifted. The backyard looked smaller somehow, like the world had tilted. My dog, Samson, lay at my feet, sensing something in me had changed. I rubbed the back of my neck and tried to breathe it all in. A son. 13 years of not knowing. And now I was expected to show up and become a father. But underneath the panic, there was something else. Something soft. A flash of a memory I hadn't let myself touch in years. Emily's laugh. The way she used to brush her hair from her face when she was nervous. The quiet strength in her voice. I remembered all of it like it was yesterday. I didn't know how to feel. Angry? Maybe. Hurt? Definitely. But part of me just kept repeating the same thing in my head. I have a son. And somehow, that thought didn't scare me the way I thought it would. It didn't feel like a burden. It felt like something that was always meant to be mine, finally finding its way home. I booked the flight that night. I didn't pack much. Just enough for a few days. I told myself I was just going to say goodbye, pay respect, make peace. But deep down, I already knew. Nothing about this trip was going to be simple. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and faint lavender, the kind they use to try and cover the smell of sickness. I walked past a nurse who barely glanced up, then followed Rachel down a narrow hall with pale green walls. My boots echoed on the tile, too loud for a place so quiet. Emily was in the last room on the left. The door was cracked. Rachel didn't knock, just pushed it open and stepped aside. I took a breath and went in. She looked small, smaller than I remembered. Her skin was pale, her lips dry, her eyes barely open. There was a sharpness to her frame now, like her body was folding in on itself. She didn't speak, just moved her eyes toward me and held them there. Next to her, sitting in a plastic chair too low for the bed, was a boy. He had shaggy brown hair that curled a little at the ends, and a face that looked too old for his age. He didn't stand, didn't speak, just looked at me with this hard stare, like he was waiting for me to break. I nodded, more out of habit than anything. Introduced myself, though the words felt strange in my mouth. I'm Noah, I'm your dad. His eyes didn't change. No flicker of recognition, no curiosity, just that same unreadable stare. His hands were in his hoodie pocket, clenched tight. I noticed a small rip in the sleeve. It made him seem younger somehow. I asked if I could sit. He didn't say yes, but he didn't stop me either. The chair creaked as I lowered myself into it. The silence between us felt heavier than the machines humming beside Emily's bed. Rachel stood in the corner, arms crossed, not saying a word. She was giving us space, but it felt like a test. Like I was supposed to prove something just by showing up. I looked back at Emily, her chest rising in slow, shallow breaths. Her eyes fluttered closed. That moment hit harder than I expected. I hadn't even had the chance to ask her why. The boy, Liam, finally spoke. His voice was flat. You're late. I didn't know what to say. He was right. There are wounds you can't bandage. Some are quiet, buried deep. Sitting next to Liam, I started to realize his worries weren't just about his mom dying. They were never about knowing me. And now here I was, a stranger claiming a title I hadn't earned. We left the hospital just after sunrise. The sky was low and gray, the kind that makes everything feel slower. Liam walked 2 steps behind me, dragging a small duffel bag that looked like it hadn't been packed by him. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. He climbed into the passenger seat, stared out the window, and pulled the hood of his sweatshirt up. I started the engine and checked the mirror, more out of habit than necessity. The road out of Anchorage was empty, not much traffic that early. The snow on the ground had melted into patches, and the trees looked bare and tired. I watched the lines on the road blur by, one after the other, trying to keep my hands steady on the wheel. Liam didn't speak. He didn't cry either. Just kept his eyes fixed on the glass, his face still and unreadable. Once, I thought I saw him bite the inside of his cheek, but he didn't flinch. I wanted to ask him if he was hungry, if he needed to stop, if he was okay. But every time I opened my mouth, nothing came out. I didn't want to say the wrong thing. I didn't want to make it worse. We stopped for gas somewhere in Canada. He stayed in the car while I went in to grab coffee and a sandwich. I bought him a bottle of orange juice and a pack of crackers and left them on the seat beside him. He didn't touch them until we were 2 hours down the road. It was a long drive. 4 days, nearly 2,000 miles. We didn't play music. The radio stayed off the whole time. At night, I pulled into cheap motels and let him have the bed while I took the couch. He never said goodnight. On the last day, as we crossed into Texas, I caught him looking at me in the rearview mirror, just for a second. Then he turned away. That look stayed with me. Not angry, not curious, just tired. Like a kid who had been holding his breath for too long. I didn't know what kind of father I was supposed to be. I didn't even know where to begin. But I knew one thing. I had to try. The first few mornings were quiet. I made scrambled eggs, toast, and black coffee like always. I poured Liam a glass of orange juice and set a plate down in front of him, unsure if he liked eggs, unsure if he even ate breakfast at all. He sat straight, hands folded in his lap, and mumbled, "Thank you, sir." The way he said it felt like he was back in basic training, not a 13-year-old in my kitchen. I told him he didn't need to call me that, but he kept doing it anyway. We didn't talk much. I tried to ask about school, about what subjects he liked, but his answers were short. Math. It's fine. I don't know. His eyes stayed low, fixed on the table, as if he looked at me too long, something might break. I caught myself falling into old patterns, waking up at the same time every day, making the bed with military corners, lining up my shoes by the front door. Liam didn't say anything, but I knew he noticed. He folded his clothes neatly, kept his room spotless. It wasn't natural. It was practiced. Sometimes I wondered if that's how he thought I wanted him to be. Disciplined, controlled, easy to manage. I hated the idea that he thought love had rules. One night after dinner, I offered to watch a movie together. He nodded, sat on the edge of the couch, arms crossed, legs tight under him. I tried not to notice how far he sat from me. We picked a superhero film, something loud and fast, but neither of us laughed. When the credits rolled, he stood up and said, "Thank you, sir," then disappeared into his room. I sat there alone in the dim light, thinking about the thank you, how formal it sounded, how lonely. The hardest part wasn't the silence, it was the space between us. It felt like walking through fog, reaching out but never quite touching anything real. I wanted to tell him I was trying, that I was learning. I didn't expect him to trust me right away, but the words never seemed to come at the right time. One morning, I found him outside, tossing a baseball up into the air and catching it with his glove. I watched from the porch for a few minutes before stepping out and asking if he wanted to play catch. He hesitated, then nodded. We threw the ball back and forth for almost 20 minutes without speaking. Each throw felt like a question. Each catch, a maybe. Afterward, he said, "Thank you, sir." I didn't correct him this time. I just nodded and said, "You're welcome, Liam." There was something in his face then. Not a smile, not really, but something softer, a flicker. It was slow. Every day felt like walking uphill with a pack you couldn't quite put down. But I kept showing up, kept making breakfast, kept sitting through the silence. I wasn't sure if I was doing it right, but I was there. And for now, that had to be enough. It was a Saturday morning, warm and clear, the kind of day that made you forget the weight of the week. Liam had a game, his first since moving to Texas. He didn't ask me to come, but he left the schedule on the counter, circled in red. That was his way of saying it mattered. I showed up 10 minutes early and sat in the third row of the bleachers, just off the first baseline. The field was buzzing with energy, kids shouting, parents cheering, and the smell of hot dogs in the air. Liam stood near the dugout, glove on, eyes flicking toward the crowd. When he saw me, he didn't smile, but he didn't look away either. He played second base, moved like he had something to prove. Clean throws, quick feet, focus in every step. He struck out in his first at-bat, grounded out in his second. But on his last try, he hit a line drive to center and slid into second just ahead of the tag. The stands clapped. I stood up, hands in my pockets, trying not to cheer too loud. He looked over, just a glance, but it landed. That was the first time he looked at me not like a stranger, but like someone he wanted to see. After the game, I waited by the fence. He walked up slowly, dirt on his knees, hat pushed back. I asked if he was hungry. He shrugged, then nodded. "Pancakes?" I said. He didn't hesitate. We drove in silence to a little diner near the highway, sat in a booth with cracked red vinyl seats and syrup already sticky on the table. I ordered black coffee and the special. He asked for chocolate chip pancakes, extra butter. When the food came, we ate without much talking, but it felt easy this time. Like the quiet wasn't a wall, just space to breathe. Halfway through his second pancake, he looked up and asked what my favorite memory of his mom was. I hadn't expected it. I set my fork down and leaned back, let the thought settle. I told him about a night in Alaska, how we drove out past the lights to watch the northern sky, how she packed thermoses of cocoa and wore 2 coats even though it wasn't that cold, how she kept talking about the colors like they were alive. He smiled at that, said she always loved stars. He asked why I left. My throat tightened. I told him I didn't want to. Those orders came, and I thought we'd find each other again after. I didn't know about him. I said that last part softly. He didn't respond right away, just looked down, then pushed a bit of pancake around with his fork. When he finally looked up, his eyes were glassy. He said it hurt, that she never told him much, that he always wondered. I nodded. I told him I wondered too. When we got back to the truck, he didn't call me sir. He just said thanks, like a kid might to someone who finally showed up and stayed. I drove home with one hand on the wheel and the other resting on my thigh, thinking about how trust doesn't fall from the sky. You earn it, inch by inch. One game, one breakfast, one shared memory at a time. It happened on a Thursday night, just after dinner. We were sitting on the porch, the kind of quiet evening where the sky glows orange for a long time before dark. Liam had his knees pulled up to his chest, watching the trees sway with the wind. I was sipping tea, not expecting anything more than a shared silence. Then he asked if he could tell me something. His voice was low, almost careful, like he wasn't sure if it would land right. He said he wanted to change his name. I turned to look at him, and before I could ask what he meant, he added that he didn't want to be Liam White anymore. I waited. He said White was just mom. Carter is both. I didn't answer right away. I think I forgot how to speak. My throat tightened, my chest felt like it cracked open in one clean line. I asked if he was sure. He nodded without looking at me. Said he'd been thinking about it since the baseball game. That something changed that day, that it didn't feel right to carry her name alone anymore. I blinked, and the tears came before I could stop them. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet streaks running down a face that hadn't cried in years. He turned toward me and saw it. His shoulders sank just a little, like a weight had finally lifted. That's when I reached out. I pulled him into my arms and held him, not with a pat on the back or a stiff hand on the shoulder. A real hug. The kind that says you're mine, and I'm not going anywhere. He didn't pull away. He rested his forehead against my chest and stayed there. I could feel his breath, slow and steady, like maybe for the first time he believed he was safe. I told him he could be Liam Carter if he wanted, that I'd be proud to have him carry my name. He didn't say anything back. He didn't need to. That moment didn't need music or speeches or perfect words. It just needed both of us, sitting on a porch at sunset, finally letting go of everything we'd been holding in. For the first time, he felt like my son. And I felt like his dad. If you asked me a year ago what my life would look like, I would have told you it was already done. I had my routines, my quiet mornings, my silence. I thought peace meant everything staying still. But then came that call. That boy. That truth I didn't see coming. It didn't crash into my world. It crept in slowly, with hesitant words, with awkward breakfasts, with a pair of brown eyes that watched me like I might disappear. I didn't know how to be a father, but I showed up every day, and somewhere between the silence and the second chances, we found a rhythm that belonged to just us. Liam changed my house, my habits, my heart. He didn't just give me a role to play. He gave me a reason to step out of the past and into something real. There were hard days, still are, days when I question everything I say. But there are also moments when I hear him laugh, when he tosses me the remote without asking, when he signs his name, Liam Carter, like it was always meant to be. I thought my life had ended the day I buried my wife, that everything after was just waiting. But now I know better. Sometimes love doesn't knock. It walks in uninvited. It takes its time. It asks hard questions and makes you answer them. But if you let it, if you open the door even a little, it builds something new. Not perfect, not easy, but real. And that's what I have now. A second chance, a son, and the kind of quiet that feels full instead of empty.